"How do you plead?" the man asked, his voice measured and slow. He was tall, not thin, but didn't carry any unnecessary bulk. It was hard to make out his features as the light streaming through the great stained glass windows of the main hall cast him in shadow. "Do I need to repeat myself? Countess de Mendes, how do you plead?" He stretched his hands in front of him and made an audible crack of his knuckles, which filled the silence of the room. The room may have been silent, but there wasn't a single space on the hastily arranged pews. A crowd had even gathered at the back, standing huddled together on the flagstone floor. There were even people with their ears pressed behind the heavy wood doors, trying to listen to the proceedings. It wasn't every day an inquisitor comes to town and prosecutes the Countess. She'd expected this, of course. The rumours about her and her predilections had been swirling around the country for months now. She sat back in the hard wooden high chair they had provided for her, pausing, her big green eyes focusing on the shadow that was the Inquisitor. She smirked, breathed heavily, and prepared to answer. But she stopped and exhaled long and slowly. She was going to take her time and enjoy this. The Countess remembered the first time fondly, how wildly underprepared she was and the mess she had made in her bedroom. The leather-bound tome she had been reading had been sitting open on her nightstand. She had been fascinated by the tales of the Hungarian Countess she had been reading about, and her experiments to achieve immortality. She had selected a pretty young serving girl to be brought into her quarters that evening. That was not unusual. She often liked to play with the servants, boys, girls, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. She loved that feeling of power over them as she made them bend to her every whim. But tonight, there would be just one. She liked to find girls who contrasted her. The Countess was elegant, dark-haired and porcelain-skinned. She preferred that her lovers were blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and as innocent-looking as possible. It added to her fun. That girl stood barefoot in front of her. A hemp dress hung from her shoulders, but was cut low enough to reveal her ample cleavage. She was twitching, her bare feet bouncing on the cold floor of the bedchamber. This wasn't the first time she had been summoned, so she thought she knew what to expect. The Countess was reclining on her grand 4-poster bed, the plump mattress and furs raising around her as she sank into it. "Cold, dear?" she asked mockingly. She knew the girl was cold. Her room was draughty, and the wooden floor did little to retain heat. She'd also purposely picked up the floor furs. She liked the idea that this girl was suffering. She let her stand there like that for a few minutes before she approached, circling her prey slowly, her lingering finger tracing the girl's shoulder, feeling her clavicle, watching her victim's skin prickle with anticipation of what was about to come. She leaned in, inhaling her prey's scent. The Countess brushed the girl's hair, thick and luscious, in her fingers. She turned the girl to face her and without a breath took the ivory-handled knife in her left hand and slit the beautiful girl's throat. The helpless victim gargled, trying to say something as the Countess was sprayed in the deep crimson blood. It was a mistake, of course. Arterial spray covered the room and her damask of her silk bedsheets. Servants scrubbed that room clean for days, replacing almost everything. Oddly, the Countess kept the girl's dress a treasured souvenir of her first. The kill, everything about it, invigorated her. The Countess herself was no more than 35, but it gave her killing the serving girl like that, being covered in her blood, wiping it from her own emerald eyes as the victim crumpled before her, made her feel alive. A snap brought her out of her reverie into the present and back to the kangaroo court she was sitting in. "Sorry, was I interrupting?" he quipped. He seemed to know she was off in her daydreams. "How do you plead, Countess? If you don't answer the question, I'll make summary judgment and condemn you to burn at the stake they're building out there. It'd be a shame to see that hard work go to waste." He had an oddly jovial tone, which contrasted the setting, like the whole proceedings were a joke. The Countess finally spoke, calm, measured, and without any visible emotion. I don't recognise the authority of this court, you or the Queen. Do with me what you will." She hadn't bothered to stand, or even turn around to see the guards surround the room. She smiled. It wasn't a small smile either. It stretched from ear to ear. She returned to her memories. She'd perfected the kill, even made it stylish, as an art form. Her favourite way was stringing the girls, and it was always the serving girls, up with some meat hooks. It made their screams delightful. Watching them as they were winched over her metal bath above her and held upside down, another servant would slit their throats and they would drain all over her. She would take a few each night. So many that her men were taking girls from her neighbouring villages. That was when the Inquisitor contacted her first, to discuss this. The show trial, the guards, even the prompt, the question. They'd even met for a meal, feasted on the flesh of the most delightful young woman. She was served spit roasted over a naked flame, carved, and the uncooked head sat in the centre of their table, a rosy red apple in her mouth. They laughed as they planned their coup, how the Inquisitor's guards would round up the monarchists and take them to the giant pyre that had been constructed in her castle square. The mass of peasants, guards who tried to fight, the civil servants who worked for the Queen screamed and pleaded as they were led to the scaffold. Right now, their allies across the country would be moving in the same way, taking towns and castles. They would even be moving in the palace. The Countess and the Inquisitor would have the Queen brought to them for trial soon. The Inquisitor and the Countess held hands on the balcony as they oversaw the mass execution, drinking from golden chalices that overflowed with crimson. They laughed at the screams, and when they finally went to bed, together, they went with the light of a full moon and the tantalizing smell of 1,000 burning corpses. It was what the Countess thought the most romantic evening of her life. Certainly, since she choked the life out of her husband all those years ago.